In this tutorial, we'll be making this style with adire fabric and striped asoke. So first off, I folded the fabric into four. The first fold will be for the front panel and the second fold for the back panel. So I'll need to pin this together, so I'll keep it in one spot. At the top edge there, I am drawing a horizontal line, and this will serve for the shoulder line. On the shoulder line, I'll go inwards from the front center with 3.5 inches for the neck width and 1.5 inches for the neck depth. That's for the back neckline. And then I'll connect the neck width to the neck depth. Now, I'll measure 7 inches from the shoulder line. I'll measure 7 inches downwards and I'll mark that point. And that's for the neck depth, which will be for the front neckline. I'll connect the neck width to the neck depth. On the shoulder line again, I am marking a half of the shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. And from that point of my shoulder measurement, I am adding 12 inches for the sleeve length. So altogether, I have 20 inches measuring from the front center, 8 inches as half of the shoulder measurement, and 12 inches for the sleeve length. At the point of the sleeve length, I am going downwards with 1.5 inches, and I will connect it to meet the neck width. Then I'll go back to the sleeve length, okay, and I'll measure 12 inches downwards from the shoulder slope, 12 inches downwards. Now this 12 inches, I'll be using a half inch to join the shoulder and 1 inch for seam allowance. So altogether, I'll be having 10.5 inches for the sleeve opening, as in just for the sleeve opening, okay? So now at the sleeve opening, at that 12 inches of the sleeve opening, I am drawing a horizontal line, and on that line I will place a quarter of the hip circumference plus 3 inches for ease allowance and 1 inch for seam allowance. So then I go back to the shoulder line and I'm placing the half length, and from the point of the half length I'm measuring 10 inches downwards for the hip line. At the point where I mark the hip line, I'm drawing a horizontal line, and I'll place exactly what I have on the sleeve opening line. I'll place it on the hip line. So I had a total of 15 inches, and that's what I'm placing there. And I'll connect what I had on the sleeve opening line to the hip line. And now at around the sharp corner there, I'll simply curve it to blend the sleeve opening line to the vertical line I drew from the hip line to that point. And then at the length, I am placing exactly what I have on the hip line on the length. So it's going to be a straight line from the sleeve opening line to the length. From the shoulder slope, I'll measure 18 inches downwards for the pocket placement, okay? That's where the pocket will come in, and then I'm cutting this out. I will not wear the sleeve pocket, so I'll know where I'm placing, okay? I'll cut out the neckline for the back, okay? And then I'll set the front aside and cut out the facing for the back neckline. So I simply brought in a folded piece of fabric and I put it underneath the back panel. I'll pin it down to make it in one spot, and then I'll cut out exactly what I have for the back neckline on the facing, trimming out whatever excess I have around the shoulder slope, and then I will notch the midpoint. Then I'll set the back panel aside and then focus on the facing. For the facing, I want to use 3 inches for the width, and then I'll mark that following the neckline and cut it out. So opening it up, the back panel, the front side of the facing will have to face the front side of the fabric on the back panel. Okay, then I'll be using this hemming gum to sew it with 1/2 inch all the way around the neckline. I'll top stitch and then give it a good press. Now for the front neckline, I have a little issue with making v-neck. Okay, so washing it, I'm simply replicating on the other fold what I have for the v-neck, simply connecting the dart to the neck width on the other side of it that the chalk was not showing. And then I brought in this piece of fabric of 12.5 inches height and about 17 inches width, and then I will place it underneath, okay, and pin it to keep it in one spot. Now the piece of fabric, you place it such that you will have excess on both sides of the neckline to take out the width of the facing. So around where I have the neckline for the front neckline, around where I have the v-neck, I'm adding 1/2 inch, okay, following the neckline, and then I mark the midpoint, okay, and then I'll take it to the sewing machine and then sew it on that line of the allowance, okay, and then I'll be trimming out the v-neck that I have initially, because that's the real neck line. Okay, the other one is just the allowance, and then I have about 3 inches excess. I have enough that I can have 3 inches excess for the facing width. Okay, so now on the sewing machine, I saw on that allowance line, and look at how I trimmed it, and I notched the midpoint, removing the pin. This is how it looks like. You see, it's perfect. Okay, I've never had a v-neck this good. All right, so this trick actually helped. So now I'll top stitch it just to put the facing behind, okay, and not be showing each time you wear it. So I'll top stitch to a point. I'll now get to that v part, okay, to the midpoint, and then I'm making it on both sides. I'll give it a good press, okay. So now I turn it the other side, and then I'm marking that 3 inches I said I needed for the width of this facing. So you need to be careful when you're cutting at this point so that you not cut the main fabric as well. So I cut it out, and then I'll do the same thing on the other side. I need just 3 inches for the width of this facing. I'll do the same thing on this other side, marking 3 inches following the neck line, and then cut out the excess. Then I'll cut out the excess that I have around the shoulder on both sides, okay, and then we are done with the facing for the front neckline. So now for the back neckline, I needed to show how I'll be using the hemming gum to sew it. Okay, so I now place the facing on the right side of the facing on the right side of the fabric, and then the hemming gum comes on top. Then I'll sew it also using the hemming gum around the hip, around the neckline with about 1/2 inch. Okay, I'll sew it all the way to the other side. Now cut out the hemming gum and top stitch following the neckline as well. and then give it a good press. After that, this is what you should have. So I'll go later to interlock the edges that I have on the facing. And then for the front neckline, this is what we have. I'll equally interlock the edges as well. So now I needed to iron the midpoint of that v-neck. That's the front neckline. Okay, that's where the asoke will come in. So I ironed that midpoint to the length. Okay, now when you're ironing, you need to make sure that the front is equal on all sides, so you be sure of the midpoint. And then I brought in the striped asoke. This is my little trick of making sure that all the stripes align. You won't want to have crooked or ugly looking stripes on both sides of it. So I needed to pin this down to put it in one spot. Okay, and then I brought in the front neckline, the v-neck, and I placed it on the straight part of the asoke. Now make sure that you have excess above the shoulder, okay, so you'll be able to trim it out. And then I pin it to the asoke. Now note that the neckline is on the straight part, and for the other part of the front panel, the way it's placed, it's looking slant now. So around that slant part, I will draw a line following what I have there, and I'm adding ½ inch for seam allowance, and I'll cut it out. I'm trimming what excess I have around the shoulder, and then I'll set the front panel aside. And that's what we have for the shoke that will come in on the front neckline. So I'll sew it on that first slant that I made. Remember, the other ½ inch is the seam allowance. So I'm sewing it on the first slant, and this is what we have. So I'll trim out whatever excess I have around the V there. Be careful when you're cutting so you will not cut the neat edge of the asoke. It frays when you cut it. So after doing that, I brought in the front panel again. Now note where we iron to get the midpoint, because it will come very handy when we are placing this striped asoke. So I brought in the asoke on the neckline. Okay, make sure everything aligns. Nothing of the fabric should be seen around the neckline, so the asoke covers everywhere. And then that part that we ironed, okay, you will need it to place the other down V, the down part of the asoke. Okay, so now the asoke is about 5½ inches, and then I will thread on the neckline and then on the second part as well. After sewing it, I trim out the excess I have on the shoulder. And that's it. So at this point, I brought in the pocket. I have 7 inches for the height and about 10 inches for the length. So I'll be placing it on the part, on that point that I marked for the pocket. That 18 inches I marked from the shoulder slope, okay? And then I'll use ½ inch to sew it to the edge. I'll do the same thing to the back panel. Now, if this video adds any value to you at all and you've watched it to this point, kindly give me a like and leave a comment in the comment section. So now I'll bring in the back panel, and I've done the same thing, attaching the pocket. I'll then make the right side of the back panel to face the right side of the front panel, and then I'll join using ½ inch at the shoulder line. Give it a good press and then went ahead to interlock it. So for the opening, altogether I have about 25 inches, and then I brought in this asoke. I folded it into two, okay, and then I made it the length of the sleeve opening, okay. So now the width of this asoke is 5.5 inches. So making it unfold, that's about 2 3/4 inches. I'll use 1/2 inch to sew it to the sleeve opening and top stitch. Giving it a good press, I'll then trim out whatever excess I have around the sleeve opening. And then bring the two together. Now make sure that the line, the stitching line aligns. Okay, I'll be taking out that 1 inch I added for seam allowance. I'll top stitch it where the pocket is, and then went in with 1/2 inch for the pocket. I'm sewing the pocket with 1/2 inch all the way around. I'll take it back to the main fabric top stitch at the point where I can sew 1 inch all the way to where the slit opening starts. Okay, I'll give it a good press, interlock and hem it, okay, with 2 inches. All right, and this is what it looks like. So if this video adds any value to you at all, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment for me in the comment section, subscribe if you like what you see here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.